This week on Democratica.
Never had any phone conversation with him.
We have not been able to confirm that yet.
And this guy was also supposed to be the investigator of Trump. And instead, not only was he Trump's defender, but he was probably part of the crime. You could not make this up.
It's the difference between a president being corrupt and an entire party being viewed as a criminal organization. All that and more coming up. From the gallery of shattered dreams in Mitch McConnell's backyard, you're listening to Democratica, the political podcast for anyone who wants to understand the news without crying yourself to sleep. You're AJ Johnson.
You are Stuart Max.
I'm a 13-year Capitol Hill veteran, a political insider, and the founder of the OD Action newsletter and network.
And I am a writer, English teacher, and human being more interested in mindfulness than politics.
But you watched the first judiciary hearings, right?
I actually didn't. But this is because I was working. I would have.
What do you have, one of those, what's it called? A life?
Yes.
Let me put your mind at ease. You didn't miss a lot in the first judiciary
That's
hearing.
what I hear.
On paper, some big things did happen. Mostly afterward, Nancy Pelosi announced that we were moving to the next stage of impeachment, that as soon as this week, the Judiciary Committee could be considering whether or not to approve articles of impeachment.
This week?
Just for a refresher, the investigation has happened. There could still be more, but for all intents and purposes, the investigation has concluded. The next step is the Judiciary Committee considers articles of impeachment. The House will vote to approve them, which is all but certain to happen at this point, then sends it over to the Senate. Remember, impeachment does not mean that the president is thrown out of office. That is the equivalent of being charged with a crime. Trial happens in the Senate, which could be happening this month. So a lot has happened, but everything that has happened is very predictable. So where the Intelligence Committee hearings were riveting, we kept getting new information. Everything seemed like another bombshell.
Yeah, those I watched.
Yeah, well, even before those happened, we kind of knew what was happening. The president admitted it, his chief of staff admitted it, and yet these fact witnesses were coming forward with new bombshells that were more incriminating. It's almost the equivalent of a murder victim coming back to life and saying, that's the guy. He did it. So if the Intelligence Committee hearings were the great TV show The Walking Dead, then the Judiciary Committee hearings were pretty much Talking Dead. You know, it was that show that came on after it where people sat around and talked about what they'd just seen. Interesting. For me, a really cool academic exercise to watch, some historical perspective. But basically...
Are you talking about Talking Dead now, or are you talking about the Judiciary?
I love the academic perspective that the Talking Dead brought to the zombie apocalypse. But basically, Democratic witnesses came in and made the Democrats' case. A Republican witness came in and made the Republicans' case. I thought fairly well, to be honest, despite the fact that facts are simply not on his side. A few things that they'd said. They compared what Trump did to what Joe Biden did. That Joe Biden had bragged about getting the chief prosecutor of Ukraine fired.
The corrupt chief prosecutor.
Well, there's the thing, and said that they weren't going to get any funding if they didn't fire him. The difference is that having conditions on funding is not a crime. The crime is Trump was using his office for his own personal and political agenda at the expense of the United States goals. So it's the equivalent of saying, well, wait a minute, you took food from a grocery store? That's not a crime. I take food from my house all the time. One is a crime and the other is not. Another argument they used, well, you know, maybe there's a crime there, maybe there's not, but why are we rushing the process? And they used that in conjunction with the idea that, you know, there's an election coming next year. Why can't we just wait and let the voters decide? Well, the crime in question is cheating in an election. So the idea that we wouldn't rush, that we wouldn't move forward quickly
before the next election,
that he is actively cheating at. It's like, sure, let's gather some more evidence before we take this guy into custody who's probably killed a whole bunch of people and will definitely kill again.
Give it a little more time.
Let's
Let's investigate just a little bit longer.
Let's let this investigation breathe. It's a bonkers argument. And the other thing is that, well, we haven't heard from a lot of witnesses. That's true. There are a lot of key witnesses that we haven't heard from because the White House is blocking them.
This cannot be real. Can you imagine as an adult human being having to stand up in front of the Judiciary Committee and make these toothless arguments? That's the first place I go, is I feel there's no way that human being had their heart and soul in that argument. There's no way part of them didn't feel like an idiot and was hoping their family wasn't listening.
See, this is where you and I diverge. I understand it's uncomfortable to watch people make arguments like this that are so completely bonkers.
But you think they believe them?
I don't care. I don't feel sorry for them. They're actively undermining our democracy.
And I feel nothing. I feel such pity. It's like, this is what you're doing with your life?
There are 320 million Americans that deserve your pity first.
And they got it. They got it.
But really, the Intelligence Committee, right when, again, we think, oh, there's all the evidence we need. We don't need more evidence. This is an open and shut case for any jury in the world besides the United States Senate. The Intelligence Committee dropped their report at the beginning of last week, and we had yet another bombshell, which was phone records that we did not know existed, that really showed this conspiracy playing out in real time, where we see Rudy Giuliani. I should say, these phone records were subpoenaed by the House Intelligence Committee. They have a legal authority to do that. AT&T, who was subpoenaed, had a legal obligation to turn those phone records over.
Yeah.
And those phone records, they don't show the content of the calls, but around the dates in question where there was the smear campaign against former Ukraine ambassador Marie Yovanovitch and the aid being withheld to Ukraine, and when the House began investigating the aid being withheld, which led to it being released, we see Rudy Giuliani, who is not a government employee. He's the president's personal lawyer who looks after the president's personal interests.
Oh, he's not even okay.
He's not a government employee.
I didn't know that.
He is a private citizen who seems to be entangled quite a bit in government business. Interesting. So we see him on the phone with the White House. We see him on the phone with the Office of Management and Budget, who is responsible for this aid being held and ultimately released. There's no explanation that anybody has offered for that. We see phone calls between him and Lev Parnas, who is now one of the indicted cronies of Rudy Giuliani. We see calls between them and John Solomon, who is this right-wing conspiracy theorist, quote, journalist, unquote, who just peddles these conspiracy theories. And right around this time, he writes these articles smearing Marie Yovanovitch as they're talking to her. Two more very important numbers: an unidentified White House line that is believed to be possibly Trump himself, we don't know yet, and Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes is the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee. He was the clown who was the lead defender of Donald Trump during these House Intelligence Committee hearings. What's important to remember is, while he wore the hat of a defense attorney, his job, as defined by our government, his role as the ranking Republican on this committee, was not a Trump defender. It was a Trump investigator. He was the lead investigator for the Republicans of alleged crimes into the President of the United States. And the whole time, he was a part of the crime. He was a conspirator. He not only talked to Rudy Giuliani at these times, where the call volume spikes right around key events.
Nunes he was part of this?
Oh, it goes deeper. He also spoke with Lev Parnas, who we mentioned a moment ago, who is the now indicted Giuliani crony who was doing business in Ukraine and had a key role in trying to lobby the government to launch these phony investigations into the Bidens. And this revelation that came with this report comes after Parnas's lawyer had already said that Nunes had meetings with Ukraine's prosecutor last year, right as the scandal was brewing, which led to the discovery that Nunes had flown to Europe, to the city in question, with 3 former aides on the public dime. I just watched your brain explode.
My mind is now blown. What is this man, Nunes? What is his possible defense?
I wouldn't say he's defended himself. It's a lot like Donald Trump saying, I didn't do anything wrong. It was a perfect call. Here's the transcript. It's not a real transcript here, but he says, here's the transcript. It shows a crime. Devin Nunes has not said, oh, I didn't fly to that city. Oh, I didn't use taxpayer money. I didn't make those calls. He has said he doesn't remember. You want to hear a clip of it?
Yes, please.
You know, what did you discuss with Lev Parnas?
Well, I don't even know because I've never met Parnas, and like I filed in federal court. And so, it's a great question because many people want to know, including myself. So,
so you never had any phone conversation with him?
We have not been able to confirm that yet.
What?
A lot of people can't remember if they've had calls with global criminals. A lot of people can't remember.
What kind of defense is that?
Well, it's no kind of defense because
remember.
We know that he had the call. What does it matter? So the question is not,
did the call happen?
Is there any plausible defense for this? Maybe. But Devin Nunes hasn't figured it out yet, is basically where we're at.
And this guy was also supposed to be the investigator for this hearing of Trump. And instead, not only was he Trump's defender, but he was probably part of the crime.
It looks like it.
You could not make this up. You couldn't sell a script based on this.
Oh, yeah, it's full of plot holes, this one. Well, because it just paints the picture of a really bad criminal. And Devin Nunes has repeatedly shown himself to be not the smartest guy on the Intelligence Committee. It's almost like an ironic appointment to put him on the Intelligence Committee. One of his stunts, and he's had many during the impeachment hearings.
That's really funny.
Thanks. One of his stunts was he put up a big sign when he was just criticizing the chairman, Adam Schiff, the lead Democrat on the committee. He was criticizing that he wouldn't follow the rules. So he put up a big poster that said, 0 days since Adam Schiff has followed the rules. So think about that for a second. If it's been 100 days since Adam Schiff has followed the rules, that means he hasn't followed the rules in 100 days. If it's been 0 days, it means he followed the rules today.
This is real.
Yeah.
These people.
I mean, it would have been a bad
country.
stunt if it made sense. It's a really good reminder. He was the chairman of the Intelligence Committee a year ago. It is so important that Democrats took back the House. He has also criticized Adam Schiff for subpoenaing his records and AT&T for turning them over. Here's a clip.
He subpoenaed from AT&T phone records.
Why would AT&T give
phone
those
numbers
up?
That's a good question. That is a very
Why
good
wouldn't
question.
AT&T say buzz off, take it to court?
AT&T should have at least went to court to try to see if what they were going to do was the right thing.
Could they do that for my phone records or your phone records? I mean,
it appears like they could.
It is not a good question, in fact, that Tucker Carlson asked Devin Nunes there. It is the law. Only in Donald Trump's circle is a subpoena seen as something you maybe should comply with.
Possibly. Maybe. It's
Maybe.
optional.
Yeah.
Subpoenas are optional for these people.
AT&T turned over the phone records because they got a subpoena. Adam Schiff subpoenaed the records because he was conducting an investigation and followed the trail of the crime, which led to Devin Nunes. We're going to get into why this is such a big deal in a moment, but I want to add that there's a third way that Devin Nunes is responding, which is just threatening to sue everybody.
Seriously?
This is a co-sponsor of a federal law that would limit frivolous lawsuits. I want you to know he has threatened to sue CNN. He's threatened to sue BuzzFeed. He has already sued numerous news organizations who have just reported on things that were negative about him. In most, if not all cases, the reporting was 100% accurate. That is also not even the most interesting of the lawsuits he has filed. He has threatened a make-believe cow.
What?
There's a Twitter account called Devin Nunes' Cow because Devin Nunes has billed himself as this farmer. Turns out he's not really a farmer. He's a pretend farmer. And so somebody created a Twitter account where they make fun of him called Devin Nunes' Cow. There's another one called Devin Nunes' Mom. It's political satire. It's protected speech. It's one of the oldest traditions in our republic. And he has filed lawsuits against them to shut them down, which have been laughed out of court. He's also sued Twitter over this. The guy is a frivolous lawsuit machine. So that is how he is responding, which is to turn himself from a criminal into a joke and a criminal.
So what does this mean?
As far as impeachment goes, probably not much. We're not far from where we were a month ago, where the president of the United States demanded a foreign country, Ukraine, do his political bidding against a political opponent and was extorting them with hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. This is a crime. It's an impeachable offense. We knew this. We have more information on why it was bad. We have more information that proves that it happened, but we're essentially where we were. And the people who were open-minded, who were willing to be convinced, have been convinced. But where we are politically going forward, this is a really huge shift. And I'll tell you why. We talked a few episodes ago about how amidst all the talk of impeachment backfiring, that historically, anytime there's even been an impeachment inquiry, the party of the president has lost power. That's not a reason to launch an impeachment inquiry, but it does suggest that it probably won't backfire. But these are relatively short-term gains, as opposed to in 1954, when Joseph McCarthy's Red Scare witch hunts were exposed for the crimes that they were. That was something that really resonated throughout the Republican Party, that incriminated a lot of people around him, to the point that when the Republicans lost the House in 1954, they didn't get it back for 40 years. So it's the difference between a president being corrupt and an entire party being viewed as a criminal organization.
I was genuinely thinking, when Trump leaves office, I wonder if half these guys are going to be indicted or going to jail.
Well, look at what's happened already. The first two members of Congress who endorsed Donald Trump have already been convicted of crimes. Just this past week, Duncan Hunter finally pled guilty. I'm going to say pled. If it's good enough for Preet Bharara, it's good enough for me.
It's pleaded.
That's fine too.
Okay.
Duncan Hunter, Republican representative from California, pled guilty to misusing $250,000 in campaign funds for personal use, lavish vacations with his wife. Earlier, Representative Chris Collins, Republican of New York, was convicted of insider trading.
I need an aspirin.
Well, wait until you hear the rest, because that's two members of Congress. That is on top of Trump's first national security advisor has been convicted of felonies, his campaign manager, his personal lawyer, 3 additional campaign advisors have all been convicted of crimes. That's on top of people like Joe Arpaio, who he pardoned, people like Roy Moore, who certainly should be in jail. It's to the point now where you've got a better chance of befriending Jessica Fletcher and not getting murdered than you do working with Donald Trump and the Republicans and not going to jail. You like that little Murder, She Wrote joke?
I appreciated that murder, that throwback.
People don't make enough Murder, She Wrote jokes
these
days.
And Angela Lansbury's a treasure.
And that's your moment of uplift.
You're welcome.
But really right now we're seeing that as corrupt as Donald Trump is, what's being exposed is that members of Congress aren't just standing by him at the expense of the country. This is an entire party of accomplices to his crimes and individuals committing crimes of their own. So this is a stench that, if the Democrats play their cards right, could stay with the Republican Party for a while. And I don't mean that in a way of saying that Democrats need to create this impression. For at least the last several years, corruption and criminal activity has been pervasive in the Republican Party. Not just Donald Trump, not just the White House, the Republican Party. They have created that identity for themselves. Now, the job falls to Democrats to make sure that the American people see that. If we do a good job of that, we won't just see the ramifications of an impeachment. We can see the fallout of one of the major political parties in the country that has truly and severely lost its way. Let's do some call to action.
If you insist.
Today's call to action is to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. Funding lapsed 10 months ago, and while the Democratic House has already approved the reauthorization, Mitch McConnell has refused to even hold a vote in the Senate. Believe it or not, the Violence Against Women Act was a bipartisan piece of legislation when it was first enacted in 1994. Then Mitch McConnell became leader and decided that the Republican Party's priorities were denying Democrats victories and not investing in vulnerable Americans. And the Violence Against Women Act is the right thing to do. It's provided victims and would-be victims with rape crisis centers, shelters, legal assistance, counseling, and a lot more. In the 25 years since its inception, intimate partner violence has declined by 72%, and sexual assault against women has dropped by nearly 60%. So let's get this done. Call 202-224-3121 or visit odaction.com/myreps to find out how to contact your representative by email and phone and tell them you want the Violence Against Women Act reauthorized. That's odaction.com/myreps or the Congressional Switchboard 202-224-3121. Moment of uplift. Uplift.
Moment of uplift.
Moment of uplift.
Early this year, in response to the activism by the student survivors of the Parkland High School massacre, Dick's Sporting Goods decided to stop selling assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. And everyone said, this was a mistake because the NRA was going to come after them and that they were going to lose sales. And they did lose sales for about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then they recently posted their best quarterly sales result in 6 years.
Wow.
So it turns out that the huge behemoth that everyone thought the NRA was is not the case. And it turns out that activism by high school students in response to something truly terrible, but genuine, heartfelt, compassionate activism by high school students has changed the world. It's working toward changing our gun legislature. It is working toward making school massacres, that much more visible and putting the onus on these companies like Walmart and Dick's that are selling, or at least were selling, guns and magazines and the like. So
I mean, the Parkland students have been an inspiration.
I really think someone could nominate these kids for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Older people make fun of younger generations all the time. And you know what? If they seem a little immature at times, it's because they're young people. But the things that we have seen from the Parkland students, from climate activists, Malala Yousafzai for sure. Greta Thunberg has been an inspiration that I wish older people would take the example of more often.
I mean, honestly, I keep thinking, if a 16-year-old can do this, if 17-year-olds can do, we can.
Let's do some stuff.
Let's do some stuff.
And what Dick's showed is that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't have to be a sacrifice. If you know it's the right thing, other people probably do too. It's unfortunate corporations have, in some cases, had to be the ones to step up where our government has failed. But if the government is watching, let's be real, if Republicans are watching, do the right thing. Maybe it won't hurt so bad. Maybe it will save lives and it won't ruin your career. But honestly, if it saves lives and it does ruin your career, I'm fine with that too. And so should you be.
I almost said preach.
That was very uplifting, AJ.
That was very uplifting, Stuart.
All right, well, let's follow the inspirational lead of these young people and keep fighting the good fight, AJ.
You too, Stuart.
Democratica is produced by Sam Graber and engineered by Mark Charles, with support from Fifi Sun, recorded at the Ramshackler Room with music from Mike Michael. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Democratica on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast app you like to use. You don't want to miss an episode, and we'd miss you if you did. So please subscribe, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star review.